Practicing peace. Am I going to go to war or am I practicing peace? This quote is a difficult one. If we can learn to open our hearts, anyone, including the people who drive us crazy, can be our teacher. We can use our difficulties and problems to awaken our hearts. Another quote by Pema Chodron. And these are some examples. Me, selfish people, or people who are not necessarily selfish but self centered. They don't really see us. When we're in a conversation with them, it's all about them. They rarely even think to ask how we're doing, or they ask and then they skip right over into talking about themselves again. It could be someone who's really messy in our house and we like it to be really neat, and we're arguing with them about that all the time. Shaming, bullying, contempt, those are always really activating for people. They're hard on the nervous system. Being stuck in traffic, slow drivers, dangerous drivers, all of these things are ways that we're in interaction with the world around us. It could be somebody in a store who's rude to us. There's all kinds of ways that people are out in the world. And sometimes we ourselves are in a fight response, sometimes it's someone else. But this quote I thought was cute. Some people are like clouds when they disappear. It's a beautiful day. So, how can we practice peace in an authentic way when there are so many difficult people around? One of the things that makes people the most dangerous is when they're in a fight response. There's an intense, stormy kind of an energy. We've talked about emotional flooding and how it takes about 20 minutes for the adrenaline and the cortisol to settle out of our system. In the meantime, we don't really have access to our full brain. But when we're lashing out or when somebody else is lashing out at us, or physically or verbally, it triggers fear. We walk on eggshells. We don't want to set them off. On the other hand, the brain likes the stimulation. It feeds on anger like kindling. So it likes that electricity. And instead of feeling overwhelmed and scared, someone in a fight response feels like they're taking action and protecting themselves. So it's a hard thing to turn away from, even when we realize it's not all that helpful. We tend to go off on a rant with people. And if we're around other people who like a fight response, we can get really stirred up together and we just ramp it up, ramp it up. I know I remember going into the office and after somebody had cut me off in traffic or something, and it's still on my mind. It's like, oh, you wouldn't believe what happened to me on the way to work this morning. And then everybody gets kind of ramped up. So, this fight response is a big part of what makes it hard for us to practice peace. We go to war because we feel outraged, we feel justified, we don't want to feel powerless. We get into a fight response. And again, a fight response is very different from feeling and expressing anger. A fight response is a survival response. We've kind of lost our mind a little bit. A fight response can also show up as an internal, mean inner critic. Sometimes we direct that outward to others, but often that's what's going on inside of us. And then we have to protect ourselves. We're at war with ourselves. We have to protect ourselves against that inner critic. Every day we think about the aggression in the world. Everybody always strikes out at the enemy, and the pain escalates forever. We could reflect on this and ask ourselves, am I going to add to the aggression in the world? Am I going to practice peace or am I going to war? As we sit with that, notice, what does that feel like in your body? What are the thoughts in your mind? There are lots of legitimate things to be angry about. We're not saying we shouldn't feel anger or that we shouldn't notice injustice. What we're doing then is we're looking at what's the reality of the situation, and am I going to add to the aggression or am I going to practice peace? Let's do the inquiry. We don't set out to save the world. Another quote from Pema Chodron. We set out to wonder how other people are doing and to reflect on how our actions affect other people's hearts. The first thing I would say about that is that we don't have the capacity to do that when we're in a survival response. We have to be able to be up out of fight, flight, freeze, or fawn and into ventral vagal. So we need to be steady before we have self compassion or before we have room in our hearts to reflect on how what we're doing affects other people. Let's start with a fight response. What does it feel like when you're in a fight response? Let's take 2 or 3 minutes here to bring this up in full living color, so to speak. What's happening in your body, your breath? What does it feel like when somebody does something and you go into a fight response? You go to war with them. What are your thoughts, emotions, and what kind of actions might you take? Use that visual imagination and the somatic mindfulness to bring that up for you. I'm sure we've all had that experience of being in a fight response, even if it's not our usual response. Or maybe you're thinking about someone else who's been in a fight response, and that triggers you into a fight response or maybe into a freeze or something else. Let's sit with that for a bit just to notice, what does this feel like? Remember to stay grounded in your body. Notice your breath. You could keep your eyes open. Look around the room. Notice that we're doing an inquiry. We're not actually in a situation. And then let that one come to rest. A reverse inquiry is when we say something that we know isn't completely true. It's not an affirmation, it's a way to elicit what our unconscious mind is thinking about this or saying about this. Reverse inquiry, I can tolerate not winning in this situation. So bring to mind a situation that you could work with, not a 10 out of 10. Usually, when we're doing these shorter inquiries, it's helpful to do something that's got enough juice, but it's not going to put you over the edge. If you're having trouble staying regulated, just pause, bring yourself back into your body, do some tapping, put the images into the frame, look around the empty space around the outside edges of the frame a few times in each direction. We want to stay here in this moment as we're doing the inquiry. So bring your adult self here, not that outraged teenager, and stay in that state of ventral vagal where we're connected with ourselves. So you could bring up the same situation if you want. What does it feel like in your body and breath when you're emotionally regulated, when you're steady and calm? Not calm in the sense of absence of emotion, but calm in the sense of not losing it. So from here, notice your thoughts, emotions. What do you want to do? And what actions might you take? So the key here is to stay present. So having your eyes open is helpful. Noticing you could hold your own hand, you could give yourself a hug. If you have a lot of activating thoughts, you could work directly with the thoughts for a bit. And notice the energy in your own body. What are the sensations? If you feel like you're being pulled into a fight response or a flight, freeze, notice that. Is it an energy in your body? Probably is an energy combined with some thoughts. You could notice the space around the energy as well. And reflect on how that might affect other people's hearts. So, whoever it is that you're working with in this situation, if you stay regulated and take the kind of actions you're thinking about, you might express a strong anger or set a strong boundary. It's not about just being nice and people pleasing. But if you're regulated as you're doing it, how might that affect their heart? And how might you cultivate peace in this situation? Stay with it, stay grounded, stay present. If this is somebody that you care about, how are your actions going to affect them? And this is not to say that we should always try to avoid affecting other people with our actions. We have to consider ourselves and be on our own side too. How could we practice peace in the situation instead of going to war? What would that look like, feel like? And notice your heart. Do you feel open hearted? Anger and injustice, often we feel pretty closed in our heart. Like, I don't even want to be friends with them anymore. I just need to stop them from doing this. So notice if you're in kind of an edgy, cold hearted place. And if that's the case, that's fine. That's what is. We don't need to shame ourselves for what is. It's natural to feel that way. One of the ways that we protect ourselves. Take a few deeper breaths if that feels okay. Let the energy calm. And let's look at this last statement. I am willing to cultivate practicing peace in this situation. The first part of that is a willingness. Am I willing to practice peace here? And again, honesty. Honestly, sometimes we'll say no, not right now, maybe not ever. We're dealing with reality. There's something that's going on that's hard. And what would it look like to practice peace in this situation? It doesn't look like letting somebody get their own way or kind of stomp all over us or our feelings. We might still be very firm, but maybe it's the way we word it. Maybe it's the words we choose. Maybe it's that we do our own work ahead of time so that we can stay regulated when we're addressing the situation. Let's sit with this for a few minutes and see what's coming and going, what's happening in your body, your mind. I am willing to cultivate practicing peace in this situation. Not forever, not always, just in this particular situation. I could practice peace instead of going to war with them. It's a given that all of us here want to practice peace. We want to be open hearted and not cause damage to people in this world. We don't set out to save the world. We set out to wonder how other people are doing and to reflect on how our actions affect other people's hearts. How does that resonate for you right now? I'm willing to at least consider that and try to do the least amount of damage that I can as I'm doing what I feel is right. And if this applies in this situation, you might also bring in how this is harming that person. If someone is difficult to be around, if they're being judgmental or in a fight response with other people, it's hard. They have a lot of people who are trying to stay away from them. They might not know that that's what's going on. They might not have that insight, or they might not be able to control their fight response. They might not have that opportunity or that access to emotional regulation. Lots of times when we're in these situations, we don't see very clearly. So if you have that inclination to look at it and see what is the harm that they're causing to themselves, you could bring that in too. Sometimes I find that helps me to open my heart. Maybe they're looking for connection, and in fact, they're driving people away. And then over the next couple of minutes, let's come back in to just noticing what is going on in my body and in my breath. Take a moment to kind of wrap up the inquiry. What have you noticed and learned? Could you bring some kind attention into your own heart right now? These are hard situations to work with, and it's hard to stay in connection with ourselves and with other people when something is going on like this. If you want, you can put your hand on your heart. I'm willing to cultivate practicing peace, and I can be kind and non judgmental This is hard. I'm practicing.